Tax will now come to order. First item of business for the day, bill introductions. Do we have any requests for bill introductions? Representative Day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am introducing the Marketplace Facilitator bill. It is RS number 2104-RS0496, and it's on behalf of the Governor's Tax Council.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let's get started. A little after 3:30. We call this meeting to order. We will begin with request for bill introductions. President.
Sorry, committee, I'm trying to do about three things at once here. So, yes, we have the request. Committee, any questions? I just have one quick question. How do you know how this is different from the current Marketplace Facilitator bill that we have?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know that there's a huge difference in it, but there are a few changes that we'll probably discover. Yeah.
I'm sure we will.
Yeah. Thank you.
Committee, any further questions? Any objections? Representative Stogsdill, is that an objection? I just saw your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm introducing a bill on behalf of the Governor's Tax Council. It is RS. Yeah.
Just a moment. I was teasing you a little bit there. We weren't quite ready for you, but
Okay.
Seeing no objection to the bill request from Representative Day, the request is approved. Now, Representative Stogsdill, do you have a bill introduction?
I still do. Yes. It's on behalf of the Governor's Tax Council. It is RS 0512, and it applies sales tax to digital goods.
Thank you, Representative. Committee, any questions? Any objection to the request? Seeing none, the request is approved. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee, any further requests for bill introductions? Seeing none, we will conclude that order of business. Committee, today we have two bills we will be working, House Bill 2104 and 2106. Before we get started, I wanted to just go over a few procedural items since this will be the first official voting that will be taking place in committee. Some of you have served in committees where you've had some voting going on already, working bills, debating bills, and offering amendments. Every committee chair might have a few different rules on how they handle this, so I just wanted to lay out the procedure so we are all familiar with what we expect in this committee. First of all, a committee doesn't actually pass legislation. We consider it and we will make a motion to recommend for passage to the committee of the whole or make a motion to pass without recommendation. I don't know if it's ever been tried before, but a motion to pass unfavorably or recommend unfavorably for passage is not in order. It has been tried before. Okay. According to committee rules, that is actually not in order. Sorry, got a little feedback there. So just wanted to make you aware there is a motion to start. I will open up, ask what your wishes are for House Bill 2104. We will have a motion. Not yet. I'll go through the procedure just so everybody is familiar with that. We'll have a motion and a second, and then discussion will open up. During discussion, if you have something to comment on the bill, you can do so. If you have an amendment, you can say, Mr. Chair, I have an amendment, at which time the amendment procedure will be a lot different this year. Typically, we have staff in the room. They will help distribute that amendment, the paper amendment, so people can read and follow along. Mr. Siebers, would you like to, you'd probably do a better job of this than I, if you would like to explain exactly how the amendment procedure and process is going to work in committee?
Sure, I'd be happy to, and feel free to step in and correct me if I say anything that if I say anything wrong. How I believe it will work is for people who have discussed, with me amendments prior to the actual meeting, I will prepare some, prepare the amendment, obviously, print some out, and I can either, I believe, drop them off with Leah before the meeting, the actual physical documents, or I can have, if you're okay with that and I get your permission, I can never release an amendment prior to receiving the permission of the requestor. That's why I just can't automatically give them to Leah to bring up. That would, breach confidences and things like that. So what our kind of practice I believe we're going to undertake is for any amendment that's requested of me or this office for this committee, I will, of course, prepare the amendment. With your permission, if you agree to I'll take them to Leah, the hard copies, to distribute during the committee. If you would prefer to bring them yourselves, I'll prepare them. Probably leave them at my front desk with the receptionist. Feel free to stop by, let me know, and feel free to stop by, and then you can bring those to committee yourself if you'd prefer to hold on to them and not, have Leah bring them. During committee, it's my understanding that any amendment that's offered, once the amendment is actually offered, I would then email to the committee members who are online or things like that, or have computers in front of them, or who don't want paper. So there'd be the digital copy you'd be getting through email. Then lastly, Leah would put the document up online after the meeting is over for everyone to see. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and I'm sure we might have some questions as we get into the process. Might be trial and error, as we've said all along. Have patience, and we'll work our way through this new system of doing things. The main thing I want to make sure as a committee chairman is that everybody has the language in front of them, either in a paper copy if you've forgot to bring your computer up, or if it is electronic. I want to make sure everybody has that in front of them before they have to vote on a certain amendment. After an amendment discussion is done, you will close on your amendment, and we will continue the process along. Once the discussion and amendments are completed, we will have a motion to close on the original motion, and at that point we will vote. Now, voting will be done also a little bit different this year. It is my preference to go ahead and function as normal, call for a voice vote, all those in favor, and I will allow everyone to give their voice vote, including any that are online virtually. I'll try to take a brief pause and then call for any opposition to the vote, at which point the chair will call how it appears to me, just by voices. If there's any question or if it's a close vote, you can always call for division. At that point, for anyone in the room, it'll be a show of hands. If you are participating virtually, it will also be a show of hands, and we will count the vote, tally the vote for all those in favor, make sure we get all those taken care of, and do the same thing for any that are opposed. If you're online and you either don't have video or something isn't working correctly, you can also use your raise hand feature. The problem with that is, and I will warn you, not everybody remembers to lower their hand after they've hit the little button. So we will, if there's any discrepancy, if it appears you're trying to vote twice or have any issues there, we will try to clear that up. I do want to also remind everybody of the committee rules. Rule number 12 states that you do have to be inside the Capitol building to vote. You can be in your office, you can be on the chamber and the floor. If the library was open, you could be in the library, but you do need to be in the Capitol building if you are participating virtually to have your vote count. Committee, are there any questions about the voting process, amendments, working bills? Everybody is still awake, right? Okay. Okay. All right, committee, if there are no further questions, we will move into House Bill 2104. Committee, what is your desires on House Bill 2104? Representative Mason. Yes. Mr. Siebers, would you give us a brief overview of 2104?
Sure, I'd be happy to. As you may recall, House Bill 2104 would amend a current sales tax exemption for educational institution building materials. There's currently a sales tax exemption for purchases But however, this does not include a sales tax exemption for building materials. The bill would allow certain qualifying institutions the sales tax exemption for these materials in the event that the housing would not be inhabited by students of the educational institution. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Committee, any questions? Seeing none, what are your wishes for House Bill 2104? Chair recognizes Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the committee recommend favorably for passage House Bill 2104.
Got a second by Representative Helgerson. Committee discussion. Representative Helgerson.
Mr. Chairman, with the new rules, I'm not sure how you'd like this, but I think the conferees spoke about on the last page, the last line where it's where it would take effect in the publication in the statute books. They said the register would make it a whole lot easier for them. So I would make a motion that we change that from the statute books to the register. I don't have it written, but fairly simple.
Okay, Mr. Siebers, is there an amendment on that?
I do not actually have one drafted, but I mean, it's up to the chair's discretion. Oral amendments, especially one simple as just changing the Kansas and statute book to register. I mean, unless there's some sort of question on that, I don't have one prepared, but it's fairly straightforward.
Okay, I just wanted to double check, see if we had a chance to practice on distributing that or not. So, thank you. Committee, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Representative Mason for the second. Discussion on the amendment. Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, as that amendment was being drafted, I instructed the reviser that we did not need paper copies since it was such a simple thing. So if you're looking at your bill, it replaces the last two words of the bill where it says statute book and replaces them with Kansas register. That's it. So it just changes the effective date from July 1st of this year until whenever it is published in the Kansas Register by the Secretary of State. And we do consider this a friendly amendment. I would urge your support.
Mr. Siebers, would you give, especially for the benefit of some of our newer members in the legislature, what is the difference between regular statute books and the Kansas Register?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Usually most bills go into effect on, we refer to statute book. In Kansas statutes, there's a statute that says that means July 1. So even though the books may or may not be printed by July 1, when they say, all bills, or the bill becomes effective, the statute book, it's commonly referred to as July 1, is when the law would go into effect. When we do, and that's kind of the standard practice, there's a way to expedite that process, assuming the bill gets passed and either signed into law or whatever. If it becomes law, to move it up the timeline for a bill to go into effect, the quickest way is Kansas Register. The next question is how often are those produced? It depends on, I believe it's bi-monthly. So it's much quicker, and they can also do them even quicker than that if in certain circumstances. It's really up to the Secretary of State discretion of when they produce that. But it's really at the legislator's fastest ability to get a bill into law and get it effective.
Thank you. Committee, any further questions on the amendment? Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Helgerson, you may close.
I move the amendment.
Committee, you've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Committee, any opposed? Motion carries. The amendment is passed. Back on the bill. Any further discussion on the bill? Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question about, in particular, the Quinter Airport. Is it done? Is that something that drops off this, it's on page 36, quadruple L. I know that they got a tax exemption. When does that, it doesn't appear to have a price yet, and how do we get that off? Are they responsible for telling us when they're done?
Mr. Siebers, is there a process for dropping off expired or older statutes, whether it be the Quinter Airport or any others that are no longer valid?
There's kind of a two-part question. The Quinter Airport, I know that one was a time limited. I'm pulling it up here. I guess quadruple L, I think that was, that one's set to expire on July 1, 2019. So essentially what that is just dead language in the law. It has no application at this point. The sales tax is expired. So they don't have, it's not effective anymore unless it was, I know there were a bill a year or two ago to extend that out, but it didn't ultimately pass. So that language has no effect in the statute for them to have a sales tax exemption. And I know there's quite a few throughout this statute, which I will admit is lengthy and a little cumbersome. There is no process unless the legislature goes through to actually remove the language or existing sales tax exemptions that exist. We can't take it off, and no one else can unless it's passed in some subsequent legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick extra question. Is that not something that we should be doing on a regular basis to clean up the statute books that have a lot of dead language? Particularly if someone, say they moved, that this be amended or doing something with it, perhaps they could be the one that checks to see what should be taken out.
You want to hear an amendment?
Just a thought.
Okay. Yes, and that's something that could be legitimate, checking into each one of those. I don't think we wouldn't want to do a repeal of any law unless we are certain that the project is completed or does not have any other additional phases, but would certainly want to make sure we run that through the process and be aware of whether the project is completed.
I just think we get a little cumbersome in the law and don't take things off that should be gone. And if you're going to add things to a bill, perhaps you should be looking to see what needs to be removed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
To my knowledge, we don't have any pay-go rules for legislation, but maybe that's a good idea. You put one statute on, you have to repeal another. I digress. Committee, any further questions on House Bill 2104? Representative Turner.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The language in this thing just seems a bit tortured as I was trying to read through it and understand it, and as I followed to try to figure out where it all begins. So basically they're saying these organizations that are educational institutions have an exemption for purposes of conducting their programs and activities, but whatever the legislature at the time specifically carved out that it's not to be used for human habitation. So that was there. So now we're going to amend that to say provided such housing will be inhabited by students. So it comes down to a definitional thing of what's a student and what's a resident, as I understand it, because originally the organization registered as an educational institution. So that's why they seem to be alone in this world of needing to have this language adopted. So I'm not sure what better way to get to the end that they want to accomplish short of them re-registering as an appropriately categorized organization. And I don't know that answer. I've posed it. But the second question I have is I don't know what barriers there are to anyone registering as an educational institution and then constructing housing for residents and not for students. So anyway. That's why I say it's a bit tortured, and I tried to figure out why it's twisting and turning and trying to accomplish an end, and it seems to be because the original registration of the cerebral palsy organization was as an educational institution instead of probably what it should rightly be. So Just a point of order, I guess.
Do you want the reviser to comment on that, or if possible, or?
Certainly. If there's more to be lent to that, sure, I would like to hear it.
Mr. Siebers, do you have any thoughts on the question?
I mean, I can speak to the drafting. Of course, this was the language they requested. Specifically, I'm not familiar with how the organization is set up, obviously, but I would agree it is a little, it's essentially like an exemption to an exemption. It's looking at the language is you have to read your way through it a few times. I would agree with that. It's can be a little challenging to understand the actual language.
And perhaps that's a result of years and years of additional legislation and built on additional legislation. I'm sure if we were to write this statute today as a standalone statute, it would be much cleaner. Committee, any further questions? Seeing none, Representative Mason, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll renew my motion to recommend House Bill 2104 favorably for passage.
As amended?
As amended.
Very good. Committee, you've heard the motion. All of those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Committee, any opposed? Hearing none, it appears the ayes have it. And the ayes do have it. House Bill 2104 is recommended favorably for passage. Thank you, committee. We will now move on to House Bill 2106, and I would turn once again to the revisor's office for an overview of 2106, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2106 would extend the time frame for when corporations are required to file their income tax returns. The current deadline in statute says April 15th. However, there are certain the Secretary can extend that with good cause, I believe is what the statute currently says. But what this bill would do is, under the bill that it would set in statute, that corporations might file a return within 1 month after filing their federal tax return. So it sets a clear standard, and this would include any extensions granted. There would be no penalties assessed if the corporation received an extension to file a return with the IRS. And the taxpayer is not required to file an extension request within KDOR subsequently. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Adam. Committee, what are your wishes on House Bill 2106? Chair recognizes Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the committee recommend favorably for passage House Bill 2106.
Second by Dr. Epley, Representative Epley. Committee, any discussion? Seeing none in the room and none online, Representative Mason, you may close.
That was easy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll renew my motion.
Thank you. Committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Committee, any opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. House Bill 2106 is recommended favorable for passage. Committee, that concludes our business for today. Is there anything that needs to come before the committee? Seeing none, thank you. That was fairly painless. We are adjourned.